And let's have a look at some of the subordinating conjunctions, examples of these. Here are some of the very common subordinating conjunctions, and their purpose is to introduce a dependent or a subordinate clause. Although, because, even though, unless, when or whenever, you will see them quite often. As is the purpose of subordinating conjunctions to introduce subordinate clauses, there are connecting words which introduce or join independent clauses together. Let's have a look at them. You can have independent clauses connected by a comma and little conjunction, and, but, or, in which case these are called as coordinating conjunctions, because on the left hand side and the right hand side of these conjunctions there are independent clauses. That's how it's in the coordinated manner. You can join the independent clauses through a semicolon. The semicolon indicates that there is some relationship between the two independent clauses. You can use them by a semicolon accompanied by a conjunctive adverb such as however, moreover, to show the stress, or to show that we want to add to the previous thing, or do we want to give a twist to what we have in the previous independent clause. And of course, independent clauses are often not connected by any punctuation at all, but are separated by a period, in which case they also make up a whole complete sentence. Dependent clauses are often categorized by the role they play. Their types are determined by the role they have in a sentence. Let's have a look. They can be of the type of noun clauses. What it means is that a dependent clause will be introduced in a sentence, and it would act as a noun, and you can literally replace it with a noun. They can be the subjects, subjects those who act, objects those who are acted upon by the subject, and objects of a preposition is a phrase. The object of a preposition is a phrase which is followed by a preposition. Let's look at this sentence. What Tove Trop has forgotten about American politics could fill entire libraries. The dependent clause here is what Tove Trop has forgotten about American politics, and you can easily replace it with let's say biographies. Biographies could fill entire libraries, and biography is a noun. Biography is a plural noun, so that's why this dependent clause is a noun clause. In the next example, President Johnson finally revealed, and from here onwards we have a dependent clause, what he had in mind for his congressional leaders. If I replace this chunk, this dependent clause, with a noun, for instance, President Johnson finally revealed the plan, so this acts perfectly as an object. The object, the plan, which was revealed by the subject, President Johnson. Next in line, Sheila Thistlethwaite has written a marvelous book about. Now this is where the preposition comes, and what follows is a dependent clause. How American politics and economic processes often run counter to common sense. From after about, I can replace it with a noun. A book about biosciences. The next type of dependent clause is the adverb clause. The adverb clause tells us something about the main verb, the sentence's main verb, and it answers questions such as when something happened, why something happened, and under what conditions something happened. Have a look at this one. you can see the dependent clause after a preposition. So after is a preposition, and Jubal Early invaded the outskirts of Washington. This is a dependent clause. Congressional leaders took the southern threat more seriously. So when did they take the southern threat more seriously? That is answered by the dependent clause after Jubal Early invaded the outskirts of Washington, and as a result it's acting as an adverb clause. The next one, Lincoln insisted on attending the theater that night because it was important to demonstrate domestic tranquility. Here, because onwards is a dependent clause, and it's answering the question. The question is why Lincoln insisted, and the answer is because it was important to demonstrate domestic tranquility. As a result, this is an adverb clause which answers the question why. Notice how they begin with dependent words. For instance, the first one depends with after, the second one begins with because, and these words are, just to reiterate, the subordinating conjunctions. The next type is an adjective clause which modifies nouns or pronouns in the rest of the sentence. Look at this example for the internet, which started out as a means for military and academic types to share documents, has become a household necessity. Now this sentence is quite interesting. If you see the main clause here, there is a dependent clause which has been sandwiched between the main clause. The main clause here is the internet has become a household necessity, but in between we have a dependent clause which started out as a means for military and academic types to share documents, and this whole dependent clause is modifying the internet. So the internet which started out for military and academic types to share documents, that is how the internet is getting modified. That's why it's a adjective clause. Next, Tim Berners-Lee, who developed the World Wide Web. Who developed the World Wide Web is a subordinate clause, and it is modifying Tim Berners-Lee. It tells something about Tim Berners-Lee. And the main clause is Tim Berners-Lee could never have foreseen the popularity of his invention. The graphical user interface that we all take for granted nowadays is actually a late development in the World Wide Web. If you see the main clause here, the main clause is the graphical user interface is actually a late development in the World Wide Web, and it has been sandwiched, the subordinate clause has been sandwiched between the chunks of independent clauses, and it is that we all take for granted nowadays, and it's modifying the graphical user interface. And that the pattern that we noticed here is the subject is separated from its verb by the subordinate clauses in the middle, or the dependent clauses in the middle. Now the common errors that happen with clauses are sentence fragments and run-on sentences. In sentence fragments, we end up making a dependent clause a complete sentence, and in case of run-on sentences, we end up merging two independent clauses with a subordinating conjunction. Understanding the clauses and how they are connected within the largest structure of the sentence will help us to avoid these two errors Not only that, it makes it possible for us to punctuate our sentences properly and write confidently with a variety of sentence structures.